In the most secluded corner of the Library of Universal Knowledge, nestled among ancient tomes and forgotten scrolls, rests a text bound in ornate gilded leather, its cover inscribed with the shimmering words, "Destiny in your hands." Unlike ordinary texts, its pages are crafted from a radiant material that seems to absorb and reflect the very light of the cosmos. Legend tells of Earl Nightingale, an enigmatic sage who traversed the vast expanse of the universe in search of the ultimate secret, the power to shape one's destiny through sheer will. His travels uncovered ancient prophecies and lost teachings, which he meticulously recorded in this tome now before you. Opening this text is not just an act of reading, it is a journey beyond the confines of time and space. Each word whispered by Nightingale transforms into a luminous thread, guiding you toward a profound realization of your inherent potential. Within these mystical pages, you will uncover the keys to unlocking the latent power within yourself and directing the course of your life towards the greatness that was always meant for you. Prepare to unravel the enigma of destiny that rests in your hands, as Earl Nightingale reveals secrets that have enthralled sages and seekers throughout the ages. Embark on this extraordinary adventure, for the most remarkable journey of your life is about to begin. I'm sure it seems as incredible to you as it does to all of us that the vast majority of people must learn things the hard way. It is natural to think that if one generation makes a discovery, the following ones will know it and use it for their own benefit. But in many cases, this is not true, especially when it comes to great laws that determine the direction of our destinies. In one of the third world countries, a group of day laborers was hired to work on a farm. These people came from a small, very remote village where motor vehicles were practically unknown. They enjoyed the new experience of being transported by truck. When they arrived at the place where they thought they had to get off, without a second thought, they quickly jumped out of the vehicle. Fortunately, they landed on soft ground and not on an asphalt road. But even so, the results of their unconventional method of disembarking were surprising, to say the least. They rolled and slid along the dusty path for a good distance until gravity and friction finally stopped them. None of them were seriously injured. In fact, when the terrified driver returned to them, they were laughing uproariously as they later explained the incident. The trucker blamed it on the fact that they had never ridden in a truck before. That is the obvious answer, but it is not the real reason. The incredible acrobatic roll on a remote farm road was caused by ignorance of a law that applies to trucks, boats, planes, or any moving body. Sir Isaac Newton gave us this law, which states, "A body in motion tends to stay in motion until an external force acts on it." When the workers jumped off the back of the truck, they were moving at the same speed as the truck itself. The external force was gravity pulling them towards the road, but they continued to travel at the same speed as the vehicle. Well, you get the idea. They were bruised, confused, frightened, and thrown off balance because they did not understand the primary law upon which the entire universe operates, the law of cause and effect. This law has been written down thousands of times by the brightest minds in the world, and therefore has appeared in many forms. For us, the best way to express it is as follows: our reward in life will always be equal to our service. This is another way of saying that what one sows, one reaps, Galatians 6-7, and it has been written in many ways in every language on earth. Sir Isaac Newton, in promulgating his laws of physics, expressed it as follows: for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. When you say our reward in life will always be equal to our service, the vast majority of the time, you will get general agreement. People will nod and say, "Yes, that's true." Then they will go on their way and never realize that this truth is so great and all-encompassing that every one of their thoughts and actions is affected by it. I like to think of this law as a giant apothecary's scale, the kind with a cross structure from which two trays hang on chains. One tray is engraved with the word rewards, and the other with the word service. Our way of thinking, working, speaking, and behaving is what we must place on the service tray, and the extent and nature of our service will determine our rewards. If a person is unhappy with their rewards, they should examine their service. Action and reaction. What one sows, one reaps. What you put in determines what you must receive in return. It is so simple and true, yet so misunderstood. If a business does not expand, it must examine its contribution, that is, its service. If a person is not satisfied with their income, they should examine and reassess their service. Now, whom do we serve? Each of us serves a part of humanity. These are the people we come into contact with: family, friends, neighbors, co-workers, customers, potential customers, and everyone we have decided to serve. And our reward will depend on the extent to which we serve. In the history of the world, human beings have never been so interdependent. It is impossible to live without serving others, just as it is impossible to live without others serving us. And that is a good thing. The closer this interdependence, the greater the human achievements. We need each other. In fact, we cannot live without each other. Every time we light a match, drink a glass of water, turn on the light, answer the phone, drive our car, dress, bathe, mow the lawn, or go fishing, try making your own hooks someday, we are being served by other human beings. Every time we look at our watch, the efforts of thousands of human beings have served us. We all seek rewards, and we must understand that they come in two types: tangible and intangible. On one hand, rewards include the money we earn, the house we buy, the car we drive, and the clothes we wear. But on the other hand, they also include our happiness, peace of mind, inner satisfaction, and the people who are precious to us. But remember this: everything you seek in the form of a reward, you must first earn through service to others. Any attempt to bypass this law will end in failure, frustration, and ultimately, discouragement. We can see this frustration everywhere: in tense, nervous faces, in the mountains of pills consumed daily, and in the frowns of those for whom everything seems too complicated, who have simply given up in the face of circumstances. How much of this is due to a misunderstanding or ignorance of this simple law of nature? I think a large part of it is. Now, do you understand this law intellectually and emotionally? If you do, you can chart a wonderful path through your life. Just as the farm workers jumped off the moving truck, just as a child puts their fingers in a closing door, and just as a driver speeding down the road realizes they are about to crash. How many times have you been confused for acting against the rules of man and nature? Surely you've met many people who act like the person who sits in front of an empty fireplace and says, "Give me heat, and then I'll give you wood." People seem to fall into two categories: those who understand that they need to put in wood to get heat, and those who believe they should get heat without doing anything, or who think they should get the maximum heat with an insignificant amount of wood. One could say that a person's discontent is measured by the distance between what they have and what they want. Once they get what they desire, they're likely to want even more, because that's how people are. But this can be good and is a sign of health. Constructive discontent is responsible for our rise as a civilization. Suppose you've determined what you want. Observe objectively where you are now, consider the distance between you and your goal, and think of ways to increase your service so you can build a bridge over that gap. In this way, reflection and creativity become life, and also assure us that our goals can be reached through individual effort in the shortest possible time. One morning, I was having breakfast at a restaurant in Monterey, California, one of the most beautiful places in the world. Suddenly, I noticed that at the next table, there was a young couple who couldn't have been more than 25 years old. Their unhappiness was evident. The young man said, "Well, I've tried everywhere, but no one wants to give me a job. I guess we'll have to go back home." From his attitude, it was clear that he wanted to live on the Monterey Peninsula, but he was out of money and couldn't find a job. But he had said, "No one wants to give me a job." He wanted someone to give him something, and if he had reversed the idea, it would have been great if he had said something like, "Among the things I know how to do, which could be useful to some of the people in this beautiful place," or "How can I, or how can we, be valuable to this community? The people here would be glad to give us the livelihood we need if we find a way to serve them. What could they need or want? Do they need labor, first-class assistance, or both? Maybe it would be good to wash and wax cars in front of their homes. Let's buy a notebook and a pencil. Let's make a list of all the things we can do to earn a living. This will lead us to other more profitable activities, but washing and waxing could become a great service to the community. Of course, let's not stop there. Let's think of other ways to serve the people here." There, in the same restaurant, instead of feeling discouraged, they could have come up with many ways to stay on the peninsula and build a good business. They didn't need a job. They needed to think. But they had never done it before. It was as strange to them as speaking in a foreign language. There they were, a beautiful couple with two bright minds, a world of opportunities calling them, and they were going to go back home. No one had told them about the gold mines they had between their ears. Do you know how many people would have reacted the same way as these young people? The majority of people in the United States or any other country, people will do anything, even resort to crime, before thinking. George Bernard Shaw once said, "I became rich and famous by thinking a few times a week. Most people never think." The young couple from Monterey, as conscientious as they might have been, hadn't sown anything, so they couldn't reap anything. Having brought nothing to the community, they couldn't expect anything in return. To some, this may seem unfair, but it's not. On the contrary, it's totally and absolutely just. Our job is to sow, nothing more. The rest will take care of itself. We've been given the necessary tools. The only thing we're asked to do is use them. Unfortunately, thinking is not taught in public schools or most private schools. As incredible as it may seem, thinking is a completely ignored subject. A person's world can be compared to a plot of land. It exists, it's there, it has amazing potential, and it's ready to respond to every action we take on it. Whatever your work, think of it for a moment as if it were this plot of land. At first, there's nothing but dirt. If a person sits and merely observes it, nothing will happen. If they scatter a few seeds, the rain and the soil's fertility will combine to reward them with some fruits in exchange for limited effort. Action and reaction. Everything depends on what one wants to get from the land. That's why the first thing to decide is what you want. Let's say what you want is a beautiful garden. So, you clear and prepare the soil, plant grass, flowers, and a tree. From that moment on, anyone observing this plot can instantly tell how much effort has been invested in the project by seeing what the land gives back in return for all the work done. We are given the plot, and that's all we are owed. Planting is just the first step, as how we maintain it determines its growth and greatness. There is a story about a preacher who was driving by a beautiful farm. The fields were perfectly cultivated, and the crops were abundant and well maintained. The fences and barn were clean, orderly, and freshly painted. There was a row of beautiful trees leading to the owner's house, where there was a lawn and plenty of flowers. It was a magnificent sight. The preacher met the owner, a farmer working in the field, and said, "God has blessed you with a beautiful farm." The farmer paused and thought for a moment, then replied, "Yes, he did, and I'm grateful, but you should have seen this place when I got here." The man understood that he had been blessed with a good farm, but he was also aware that it was his own love and hard work that had improved it. Each of us is given a plot to cultivate. Like the farmer, we can be grateful if we have the vision, imagination, and intelligence to build upon the seemingly unimpressive ground of our beginnings. Or we can let everything fall into disarray with worn and unpainted buildings surrounded by weeds and debris. In both cases, the land is the same. What makes the difference is what we do with it. The potential for a miracle is there. We must be wise enough to see it and realize that our fulfillment as individuals depends on how we respond to what we've been given. To find ways to improve your service, read books about your specialty, read about what has worked for others. But at the same time, think of original and creative ways to do it in line with your own way of being. Striving for a week or a month, then falling back into old habits, is like working for a week or a month on this land and then abandoning it. Every morning, ask yourself this question: how can I increase my ability to serve, knowing that my rewards will be proportional to my service? Do this every day, and you will start forming one of life's most valuable habits. Horace wrote, "If someone seeks greatness, let them forget it and seek truth, and they will find both." You can dispel all confusion, complications, worries, and uncertain fears if you return to the great laws and great truths on which the world and all its successes rest. When we observe a business, we can see what it does for the community by seeing what the community has done for the business. It grows and prospers, merely sustains itself, or may be on the brink of closing. Whatever the situation, it reflects its service and the acceptance of that service by the people. The same is true for families and their residences. If you walk down any street, you will see that some are lined with beautiful, expensive homes, while in other neighborhoods, poverty is evident. The buildings are run down, the yards are overgrown with weeds, and there is scrap and debris everywhere, along with rusted cars. This reflects what the people living in those homes, whether beautiful or in ruins, do for themselves and for the community. I've always been struck by the fact that in neighborhoods with high unemployment rates, people seem to have no time to tidy their homes and gardens. while those who work the most have the cleanest and most attractive homes, with well-maintained lawns and flower gardens. The environment is a mirror of the neighborhood's inhabitants. If the people change, the environment will change too. One day, a man was watching a football game on television. His 5-year-old son kept bothering him, so the man tore a page from the newspaper. It was a full-page ad showing a picture of the planet Earth as seen from space. He tore it into a dozen pieces, gave them to his son and said, "Here, do this puzzle and show Daddy how smart you are." Then he went back to watching the game. In a surprisingly short time, the child had put the picture back together. The final result wasn't very neat, but it was a good job for someone so young. "That's amazing," said the father. "How did you do it so quickly?" "There was a picture of a man on the other side," replied the boy. "I just put the man in order, and that made the world come together." The child was surprised by the strong, warm hug he suddenly received. "That's right, my son," said the father. "When the man is in order, his world is too. Being in order means understanding how things work. Working hard isn't enough. You must work smart." How many times have we heard someone say, "My father worked hard all his life but never had anything to show for it"? This is another way of saying, "My father, God rest his soul, never knew how things work. He worked hard all his life, but in a job with very limited service." Or, "My father was a brilliant person, but he jumped from one thing to another and was never patient enough to do the current activity well, so he abandoned it shortly after starting it." To succeed, you need time, devotion, creativity, and a 100% commitment. We must ask ourselves, how can I improve my service and, in doing so, increase my harvest and rewards? All right, how can we correct the situation? William James gave us the answer. He wrote, "Either some unusual stimulus fills them with emotional exaltation, or some unusual idea of necessity pushes them beyond the limits of their will." In other words, emotions, ideas, and effort are what help us achieve our goals. If you worry about your income or your future, you're focusing incorrectly on the reward side of the scale. Look at the other side. Concern yourself only with improving your service, becoming great where you are, and your income and future will take care of themselves. Don't be like the person who sits in front of an empty fireplace and asks for warmth. First, stack the wood. The next time you're alone in a quiet place, contemplate your plot of land, that is, your life, and start planting the seeds that will give you an abundant harvest. In his essay on vital reserves, William James wrote, "Compared to what we should be, we are only half awake. Our fires are dampened, our drafts controlled, so we use only a small part of our mental and physical resources. Consequently, the human being lives far within his limits, possessing many faculties that he usually does not use. His energy reaches its peak of power, and his behavior falls below the optimal." Seeds of Success. We are going to talk about a principle that never fails, a principle that brings peace, quality, and wealth to life: integrity. Like other great principles, integrity is highly regarded but is rarely a true way of life. However, how valued is an individual of integrity in everything they say and do? When people hear the word integrity, they often think of a stern, sober person who follows the straight and narrow path. That's not the type of integrity I'm talking about, but rather an integrity with a sense of humor, understanding, kindness, and gentleness. You should never act out of convenience or say things like, "Well, everyone does it, so I guess it won't hurt if I do it too." But it does hurt, it is wrong, and we know it's wrong. The seed of success is integrity, which consists of honesty and truth. Perhaps Shakespeare expressed it better than anyone in a famous line from Hamlet. Polonius says, "This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man." If our life motto is integrity, we will have what we need when we need it. Our sleep will be peaceful, and we will be respected wherever we go. During the Korean War, Chinese communists overran an American flank and captured an American general. He was subjected to weeks of the worst treatment, brainwashing attempts, and interrogations, but he never gave in. Eventually, they told him that if he didn't answer their questions, he would be executed the next morning. That night, he wrote a letter to his wife, which he concluded with this instruction: "Tell Johnny that the word is integrity." But he wasn't killed and was later repatriated to the American forces. However, when he thought he was going to die, his only desire was that his son never forget that integrity is the most important thing. Integrity means trying to know ourselves as best we can, examining ourselves as Socrates advised, and conducting a self-evaluation, that is, an inventory of our abilities, talents, and goals. Not long ago, I received a letter from Scott Palmer that said, "I found some advice on happiness from my mentor, Dr. Brand Blanchard. I published it in my newsletter some time ago. Blanchard is one of the greatest men of our century, although few people have heard of him. Last year, he celebrated his 93rd birthday with the publication of his latest book, Four Reasonable Men, a biographical book about Marcus Aurelius, Joseph Ernest Renan, John Stuart Mill, and Henry Sidgwick. Appropriately for Blanchard, the key virtue that leads to all others is reason. Brand Blanchard is Professor Emeritus of Philosophy at Yale University and holds the Sterling rank, the highest at that institution. On the subject of happiness, he wrote, "One way to be happy is not to think about it too much. The person who continually asks whether they are happy is unlikely to achieve their goal, for happiness, as Aristotle thought, is a byproduct of healthy and fruitful work." Bertrand Russell, who wrote The Conquest of Happiness, observed that scientists are generally happier than artists, who often get lost in subjective tasks and are less prone to self-obsession. In any case, the important thing is to find what we are truly good at. This is often what is most useful in serving others, and then we should do it with all our might. Happiness will come without being sought. If one pursues it directly and stubbornly, it will be like those rich but discontented old ladies who loiter around the hotels of Miami. Secondly, the fundamental principle of my ethics is to act in a way that makes the world the best possible place. I haven't achieved it. No one has. I disagree with Dr. Blanchard. He made the world better, and many others have too. But trying to live up to this involves constantly anticipating the consequences of one's actions, choosing those that are most likely to be fruitful, and controlling impulses. Curiously, many people think that acting on impulse is a prerequisite for happiness. I agree that impulse must be present, and the stronger it is, the better, as long as it is under control. But seeking happiness with blind faith in one's impulses carries a high risk of ending up in hippie thinking, drugs, and decay. The distinguished Yale professor wrote, "The most important thing I've learned is the necessity of being reasonable. The person with the fewest regrets, who does the most for their community, whose judgment carries the most weight, and who is most trusted, is the firm and sensible person." I'm not talking about the intellectual who is often boring and impractical, but the person who, in matters of belief and action, adopts the following principle: adjust your belief or decision to the evidence. He then concluded his short essay on happiness by writing, "There is no single meaning of life, and no two lives have the same value. The richness of a life does not depend on the amount of happiness one attains, but on discovering who one is. That is the unique combination of each person's faculties, and then discovering through experimentation and reflection which life path will most fully utilize those faculties. You will never receive better advice." I agree with Scott Palmer that Sterling Professor Emeritus Brand Blanchard, at 93 years old, with most of his life dedicated to study and teaching and observing the human species, knows what he's talking about. And for me, sensibility is another word for integrity, combined with truth and based on evidence. I really liked how he ended his essay on happiness, especially what he said about each person's faculties. What are yours? There must be something, probably several things, that you can do very well, that you greatly enjoy, and that will automatically provide the greatest service to others. Are you ready to discover, through experimentation and reflection, which life path will most fully utilize these faculties? That is being true to yourself. That is integrity, sensibility, and reasonableness. Being true to ourselves means taking responsibility for making the best use of what we have. And what do we have? We possess the immense wealth of our minds, our abilities, our talents, and our time. And the investment of our wealth is what will determine our gains in all sorts of areas. Our abilities, talents, and time will always be with us, wherever we go, and they represent the value that we have. This is what makes a human being self-sufficient, although most people don't realize it. They remind me of the horse and the elephant, who are unaware of their own strength and become easily trained. In the same way, human beings live in small prisons of their own making, unaware of their ability to be free, to do what they most desire, and thereby reap a harvest far beyond what they could imagine. But they are slaves to their ignorance and follow each other like ants. How could they have invested their inner wealth when they don't even know it exists? As with any form of wealth, it's up to us to decide how we use it. We can squander it until it's gone, or invest it wisely and receive an abundant return that will more than provide for our family's needs for the rest of our lives. Only we can sabotage the wealth of our minds, talents, abilities, and time. A choice must be made, and this is where integrity comes into play. It involves making the best use of what we've been given. It sounds simple, the truth is always simple. As soon as we properly invest our wealth, we rise above the competition. We will no longer compete, we will create. Right now, you understand something that the vast majority have never known, and here lie the foundations upon which all great life stories have been built across all fields. So invest in a yellow notepad and a few pencils, and start taking notes on how to make the most of what you have. Here are a few premises for success. Success has nothing to do with the size of the brain. The largest brain ever recorded belonged to an idiot, while the smallest belonged to Anatole France, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1921. Some of the world's greatest individuals in various fields are or were short, bald and stout, while others were tall and thin. Some had excellent educations, while others had little or none at all. The person destined for greatness is the one who decides to go all in, and all truly successful people have one thing in common. They consciously or unconsciously follow the law of cause and effect and are true to themselves. Although most people agree with the principle of integrity, in reality, it matters little to them. For the vast majority, it's a matter of convenience. If it's in their interest to be honest, they will be. And if it benefits them to tweak the truth a little, they will. They tend to live for short-term or even instant gratification. They don't view success as a long-term plan and are unaware of what I like to call the infallible boomerang. Every time a person does something dishonest, whether stealing a fruit or $1,000, they launch the boomerang. The same goes for manipulating the truth. No one can predict how far the boomerang will go or the size or curve of its path. Only time will tell. But in the end, inevitably, it will return to deliver a precise and painful blow. Honesty and integrity can be good business. In fact, Mirabeau wrote that if honesty didn't exist, it would have to be invented as the best way to get rich. And this is entirely true. All we have to do in every situation is ask ourselves, is it true? Is it honest? Is it the best thing I can do? And if it is, we can proceed with the joyful certainty that we have set the correct cause in motion and know that the results will not be in jeopardy. Our only hope for real success and earning the trust of those we serve is to help them improve their quality of life. But if we only give less than our best, we are actually playing against ourselves. The average worker in our society works about 40 hours a week, which leaves 128 hours a week to do what they want. Never in the history of humanity have we had so much free time. 128 hours, more than 3 times the time we spend working. What are all these hours worth? We need to sleep, relax, and rest. But do we need 128 hours for that? Our worst enemy has never changed its name. It's ignorance. The greatest of all is the false belief that we can receive more than we deserve. Sooner or later, there will be a reckoning. Every day, for better or worse, we launch the boomerang. Let's summarize what we mean by integrity. It means giving our best in everything we do. It means being sincere with ourselves and with others. It gives a sense of justice to our leisure time. Our rest is legitimately earned. It means being willing to keep an open mind, to seek truth everywhere, to verify things for ourselves, to be critical of what we hear, and to make our own judgments. It means knowing that there are always better ways to do things. It's realizing that a person who doesn't read is no better than an illiterate, and that a person who doesn't cultivate themselves as a human being is no better than one who cannot. It's discovering that the greatest joy one can experience is the joy that comes from accomplishment. We know we will move toward our goals simply because we will become remarkable people. We won't go unnoticed because the person of integrity is always needed in any enterprise. We must always be people of integrity if we want to reap an abundant harvest. Remember that your life is like a plot of fertile land, and it can only yield what you plant in it. And what do you have to plant? You have great wealth. Your mind, untapped talents, and time that you can neither save nor hold back. Make the most of it. It's never too late. Use truth as your guide and take integrity as your life's motto. Thus, your plot of land will reward you and yours abundantly. And if you have days when you feel depressed or confused, remember this comment by Debrix. Do your work and put in the extra effort that makes it all worthwhile. You must know that you will suffer and waver, but do your work anyway. Put your heart into it, and the skies will clear. Various studies have been conducted on what motivates people to live the way they do. In this text, we have already covered enough ground to establish that people are responsible for their lives, except in cases of an act of God or government that changes things permanently or temporarily. For example, many of my friends died during World War II when they were between 20 and 30 years old. Similarly, the lives of others were irreversibly altered by serious injuries or illnesses. But most of us enjoy good health, which is the natural state of all nature, and we have a whole life to live. Sometimes, whether we believe it or not, it's a personal disadvantage. Indeed, on many occasions, it is the physically disabled who show us the limitless possibilities that exist for those willing to reach their goals, while the healthiest often choose the path of least resistance. I think it was Bill Veeck, when he owned the Chicago White Sox, who said, "I don't want a naturally talented athlete. I want someone who has walked the hard path. The people in this world who are willing to take that path are the ones who achieve greatness." Now let's look at some facts of life. Only 5% of people achieve extraordinary success in their lifetime. I'm talking about people who have higher incomes, live in more upscale neighborhoods, own larger homes, receive a better education, enjoy more of life's finer things, contribute significantly to their communities, generally have more refined English, and send their children to better schools. There are always exceptions to any rule, and there are many within this 5% group. I know a man who runs one of the largest and most well-known companies in the United States and struggles to string together 10 words in the right order. If mangling the English language were a crime, he'd be sentenced to death. Yet he owns mansions, yachts, private jets, and much more. Ask about this man with only a primary education, who seemingly has no interest in furthering his studies, and you'll find he's achieved spectacular financial success. Why? Because he knows how to serve people. The organization he runs serves millions of people every day. He has worked hard all his life to build it, and he has done it very well. That's why he can buy $3 million yachts and pay for them in cash. And when he wants to go somewhere quickly, he has his Gulfstream 3 ready to take off. But the majority of people in this 5% group fit the earlier description. Many of them aren't rich in the sense of our multimillionaire friend, but their incomes fall within the top 5% of American earnings. They tend to enjoy life a lot, play golf or tennis better than most people, and love their lifestyle. Right now, a baby is being born in the United States. According to the statistics we've discussed, the chances that this baby will not be born into the top 5% are 95-5. Like most children, he will soon take his environment for granted. Let's assume it's a boy, although this applies equally to a girl, so I'll spare myself from saying he or she throughout this interesting example. He grows up accepting his world or environment as it is, without questioning it. His environment becomes a natural part of him, and everything around him is a conditioning factor. The way he speaks reflects that of his parents, relatives, and neighbors, and what he learns in school will have very little effect on him. That's why you hear adults who have gone through the American education system say things like, "ain't," and "where you at," informal ways of saying no and "where are you" in English. They didn't learn this in school, but from the speech patterns in their environment. I know a lawyer who still says, "where you at." The way anyone speaks is immediately revealing of their education. The only reason mine tends to be fairly good is that since I was young, I wanted to be a writer, and words interested me greatly. Words are the tools of the writer, and a good writer must have a decent inventory of them. I was the only one in our family with this inclination. The others had different inclinations, and education wasn't one of them. It would be wonderful if the statistics were reversed. If 95% of people were as successful as the top 5%, the chances of a child being raised in a place with more resources and opportunities would be reversed. But that's not the case. So our typical young person, reflecting his environment, thinks like the people around him and takes this life for granted. All the people he knows are in this group, his group, and unless he finds some unusual motivation along the way, he will naturally become an indistinguishable part of the collective, whose goals, or lack thereof, become his own. A nice house on a nice street, a stable job with good income, a good wife and good children. And so the story goes, operating at minimal speed throughout his life, except for moments when he plays a sport or prepares for a date. In the United States, this country keeps growing and is so prosperous that a man doesn't need to rush to meet his average needs. The same goes for most people around the world. They don't need to do so unless they want to. No one told him this. Imagine there are two very distinct groups of people in our society, located at different levels of a socioeconomic pyramid. Suppose it was his father who told him this back then. He would have then drawn a pyramid with divisions. Here are the top 5% who live and work at the top, and here's what we call the great middle class in the United States, divided into two main groups, the upper middle class and the lower middle class. The United States has the largest middle class in the world. At the bottom, there are people who, for 1,000 perfectly valid reasons, need help from others to get by. Many of them are too old or too ill to fend for themselves. We have about 25 million functional illiterates, so the young person would clearly see his options. He would know that thanks to God and our ancestors, he has the freedom to choose. He has the option, if he wishes, to live and work at practically any level of this pyramid. Then his father would have told him this: the higher you are, the better the view, the fresher the air, and the fewer the people. But climbing the pyramid requires a lot of effort. It's easier to settle for the lower levels because there isn't much to learn. We live here at this level. It's not the highest, but it's not the lowest either. This is where I wanted to be. Your mother and I have been very happy here. I hope you understand. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we were taught all of this at 12 or 13 years old? Wouldn't it be great to see this pyramid and know that we have this option? This is for those who want to be part of the top 5% and contains much of what we need to know to get there and stay there. It's also good to remember that, like any destination on planet Earth, there are a million ways to reach that percentage. Any path is valid, any vocation is useful. If we do it right, we could become wealthy by hauling garbage, and many have already done so. It's a vital service to a community, but it must be done in a certain way. This young person, like many others of his peers, has fallen into the statistics of average Americans. They live their lives in a very ordinary way, but with the right motivation, they could become exceptional individuals and achieve extraordinary things. Thus, they could provide much greater service to their community. What are the chances that they'll one day encounter Blanchard's advice on happiness? Do you know what it is and where it comes from? Some of these young people will have explored the depths of their potential. What are you particularly prepared for by your original genetic inheritance? What do you most desire to do? What brings you the most joy? Know that your reward will come based on the extent of your service to others. Do you know why some people earn $10,000 a week while others earn minimum wage? A famous American comedian earned $12 million in 1986. Do you know why? It's because of the people he serves. Moreover, there's a banker in Los Angeles who earns about $40 million a year. You know, there's no limit to earnings. How much would you like to earn? How about $10,000 a week? How about double that? Of course, that's not all there is to gain, far from it, but it would be enough to pay off debts. And if you earn enough to place yourself in the top 5% of the population, you'll be at the top of that pyramid where the sun shines brightest. Unlike the lower levels, it's great up there. You'll be able to help others, make a greater contribution to society. You'll be a philanthropist. What do you think? There's a discussion I'd like to have with young people. Some would say it would cause discontent, but I know that discontent is the greatest motivator of all and is responsible for all the great human inventions such as potable water treatment, electricity use, sewage systems, or even the supermarket. A little discontent is good, especially when it comes to ourselves. The effect of the environment has immeasurable power. The deepest desire of young people in school is to please their peers, to be accepted and appreciated by them. So they start imitating what the other boys do, and everyone ends up acting the same way. They dress the same, talk the same, and laugh at the same things, even when it's not funny. At that critical age, they start following the followers, not the leaders. While that's fine day to day, these vulnerable and impressionable young people adapt to others. They never ask themselves if the people they're following are good role models, because the important thing is to be part of the group. That's the subtle trap into which practically everyone falls. And if we don't escape soon, it could be too late. Millions, not thousands of millions, remain trapped forever. It's amazing how many adults never get out of it. We still see them at 50 or 60 years old, still trying to be just another member of the gang. Do you remember what Willy Loman said in the great play Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller? The most important thing is to be well liked. Loman never grew up. He never knew who he was. His story is a modern tragedy. It's the story of the mob. When a person lacks their own identity, they seek it in a larger circle. That's why the idea of joining groups of various kinds is so appealing to people. In this way, we get a badge, a label that tells us who we are. That doesn't mean successful men and women don't belong to organizations or groups. On the contrary, they are part of them and contribute to their organizations. But they don't need them to have an identity because they know very well who they are and what they are. Even if their organizations didn't exist, they would never feel lost. They would be successful and autonomous. In any case, successful people follow independent paths. That's the important point to remember. At some point in their lives, they break away from the crowd and follow their own path. It's acting like an adult and being intelligent to follow such a path, not necessarily alone, but by joining a much smaller group of like-minded people. We can't put everyone in that 5%. The ancient Romans had their circus. Modern man has audiovisual entertainment, far superior to the old Roman circus, and he doesn't even need to leave the comfort of his home. It's true that there are many wonderful things in audiovisual entertainment, and it makes sense to have an eclectic approach, that is, to choose what really interests us. But millions of families are hooked all day as if hypnotized by it, and then one thinks about what they could do with just a fraction of that time. One of the best things about entering this 5% is that as we grow older, life doesn't have to become less interesting or more burdensome. We can be very active at 60 or 70 years old, or even older. Moreover, aging with all the comforts of life is pleasant and comfortable. You can spend the winter in Florida or near the equator and the summer in cooler or tropical climates. Indeed, you can enjoy all the advantages of a good life. But perhaps the most important thing of all is being able to say, I've given my best and I'm not done yet. This vacation on Earth has been a wonderful experience and I've truly enjoyed it. Now let's see what tomorrow has in store. And it's almost never too late because, with a worthy goal and the motivation to reach the upper levels of the pyramid, a person can travel farther in a few years than they might in a lifetime. Like most writers, when I reread something I wrote 10 years ago, I see ways to improve it. At the time, I didn't see those possibilities, but now I do. This means I've progressed in my craft, that I'm more capable than I was 10 years ago. Today I'm worth more, and if I keep up the pace, I'll be much better in 10 years. Before the atomic age, teachers used to say that the value of a person, from a strictly chemical standpoint, was about $32. Over the years, this opinion has seen a surprising shift. Now scientists calculate that if the electronic energy of the hydrogen atoms in your body could be harnessed, it could supply all the electrical needs of a large industrialized country for nearly a week. A scientist at DuPont stated that the atoms in your body contain potential energy of over 11 million kWh per pound. By this estimate, the average person would be worth about $85 billion. Moreover, the atoms in your body are not just simple particles of matter, but waves of living energy, and these waves propagate in patterns of light as they move. They sing. If you had the right hearing device, you could hear a grand flow merging with the waves of atoms. They not only sing, but they also glow. If you stood in front of a red camera in a completely dark room, the screen would show you from head to toe as a radiant body. In summary, you are much more than you appear to be at first glance. If we add to all this the fact that trying to mechanically reproduce your mind would cost billions of dollars, you begin to see yourself for what you are, an astonishing and infinitely valuable creature. Not only are you valuable as a human being, but you also resemble no other individual who has ever lived or will ever live. You are unique. Now, what are you trading all this for? All human beings are priceless, but the tangible and intangible rewards they receive from life vary greatly. The purpose of this message is to help you decide what you are worth as a human being right now in today's society, and what you wish to be worth, say, in 5 years. Ultimately, every person is a business unto themselves, in the sense that they build their own life. That's why I want you to think of yourself as a business or a company. You are the president of this company, responsible for its success or failure. You and the members of your family are shareholders in the company, and it is your duty to ensure that the value of the shares increases over the coming years. Now, even though the operations of a business are numerous and quite complex, they can be reduced to 4 basic functions: 1. Finance, 2. Production, 3. Sales, and 4. Research. Without adequate financing, there will be no production. Without production, the company will have nothing to sell. Without sales, production would have to stop. Without research, it would be impossible to stay current or ahead in our rapidly evolving era. If any of these 4 essential functions are underestimated, the company is handicapped, and if they are neglected, it sets the stage for corporate suicide. We will discuss finance, the monetary part of the whole affair, in another section. For now, let's focus on research, production, and sales. They represent the head, hands, and legs of a business. You could say that the head handles research, the hands handle production, and the legs handle sales. If one of these parts is cut off, the organization suffers greatly. How many companies and brands that were once great have completely disappeared from the economic world? How many names that were international leaders in their fields are now just memories? Unfortunately, they failed to maintain a balance between these 4 crucial functions. And what about research? For a company, it exists to improve 2 areas: the present and the future. That is, a company's research should focus on ways to improve its current services, production, and sales. It should also look at ways to develop new services and new methods of production and marketing. But while this research is underway, current production and sales must continue at a high level. In summary, a business must consider both the present and the future. How it meets these challenges will determine its current profits and future growth. Why are all companies concerned with growth, even when they seem to be doing well? It's a law that applies to both businesses and human beings. Nothing is static in this world. Nothing is static in the entire universe. Let's remember Newton's law. A body in motion stays in motion until an external force acts upon it. A company that is growing tends to keep growing. In other words, if a business is progressing, it generally continues to do things well. However, a business that is declining or regressing tends to keep declining or regressing until an external force acts upon it. All responsible managers know that if a business is not growing, it shows the first signs of decline. You must also understand that this same law applies to you. Now let's take a look at the next 10 or 30 years. But before that, consider this. Just 10 years ago, if someone had predicted that we would be living in the world we have today, they would have been ridiculed. I'm talking about everything from our basic industrial technology to the most ostentatious luxuries. We have reached a stage in the expansion of human knowledge where our progress is not only dynamic, but becoming explosive. It is very likely that any prediction would be ultra-conservative. Let's see what the experts say about the next 10 years. The majority of spending in highly developed countries will be on products and services that go well beyond basic needs like clothing, housing, transportation, and healthcare. Imagine that most spending will go towards things beyond these needs. This would be the first time in all of human history that this happens. It is estimated that the consumer market will grow by more than 50% in the next generation, a staggering increase that will reach hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 30 years. For every existing building, another will need to be built. And what about the future of our economy, that is, research and development? Today, more money is spent on investment and development in a single year than in the last 150 years combined. Think for a moment about what this means for you and your business. It means your future is bright, with unlimited possibilities. The intelligence of our society is constantly increasing, with notable progress in education. Over the last 30 years, the advances have been remarkable, and they will be astounding in the next 30 years. Today, the customer is smarter, and if we want to meet their demands and sell them our products, we must also be more savvy. The market of the next 10 years will be shaped by diversity, dominated by taste rather than need. There will be a significant increase in the quality and quantity of options available to the consumer. There are many signs of a growing desire for the pleasures of life. Currently, millions of adults are engaging in study programs outside of work hours, and this number increases by several million each year. This is just a glimpse of what is happening around us and what it will look like in 10 or 30 years. Now each of us, as the president of our company, must decide what to do about it. We can grow with it or fall behind. There is no other option, even if we wanted one. But this gives us the opportunity to reflect. Ask yourself, what value do I have as a business? If I were another person, would I invest in my project? A business that grows at a rate of 10% per year will double in size in about 8 years. How much attention do you pay to production in your business? Of course you can. In fact, according to experts' calculations, a person can increase their efficiency by 50% to 100% in less than 30 days. Our records are full of reports of people who have exceeded their previous performance in almost unbelievable ways. People in management and production who have multiplied their efficiency, students going from poor to excellent grades, salespeople discovering they could sell much more in a single month than they previously sold in an entire year. Think about what that means, being 12 times more efficient. And let's return to the law of cause and effect. It means being 12 times more useful, which will ensure that we receive something 12 times greater in return. Remember, if we do twice as much, we must receive twice as much, and nothing on earth can prevent that. The same applies if it's triple or quadruple. You and I know this. Everyone should know this. But remember that 95% of people are unaware of it. Think about the advantage this gives us. It's not that we want to take advantage of anyone, but it firmly demonstrates the truth of the saying, knowledge is power. You would be surprised by the large number of people who stop learning once they finish their studies. Apart from company manuals and other similar literature, they read very little or nothing of real value. However, continued education is vital. If we want to stay in the race, there is much to learn, and our school curriculum only touches on a fraction of this need. One of the most important subjects is getting along well with people. It is only through human relationships that we can grow and succeed. Unfortunately, this subject is not taught in basic education. The big ideas we talk about in this text are rarely taught at home and almost never at school. It is true that knowledge is power. Moreover, it shows on our face and in our speech. It helps us educate our children and get along better with our neighbors and colleagues. Perhaps knowledge is the greatest driver in the world. As we learn, our horizons expand, and we realize there is much more to do and more time to do it. We must abandon the idea of retiring at 65, because as long as we can learn and grow, there is no reason to stop, and we will become more efficient over time. Tomorrow is a new day. Time is the great equalizer. You have no more or less than anyone else on earth right now. Think about how you could increase your efficiency, improve your production, and thus restore your rewards. Remember that each day gives you a new page to write the story of your life. Forget the past. Don't worry about missed opportunities. Instead, ask yourself how you could better take advantage of today. As you know, at some point, we will run out of days. If we waste an hour each day, that amounts to 250 hours per year, where our business does nothing and we gain nothing in return. How much is your time worth per hour? Multiply that by 250 and you'll see what you're throwing away. Now, whether your employer pays you or not for that lost hour doesn't matter, because life won't reimburse you. Learn to make the most of every minute of your life. Be happy now. Don't count on something to make you happy in the future. As my good friend Wally Famous Amos says, happiness is a personal and private enterprise. Consider the real value of the time you have to spend, whether at work or with your family. Every minute should be appreciated and savored. In reality, a human life is just a collection of minutes, hours, and days which are like building materials. It is strictly up to us to determine the type and size of the structure we will build. A person has a huge advantage, even compared to the largest company. Think of any large multinational. It cannot double its production or sales in a day. Of course, they would love to do so, but their growth must be gradual and steady due to the complexity of running such a large organization. However, a person can double, triple, or quadruple their efficiency in a month or less. How have you managed the 4 vital functions of your business? Finance, research, production, and sales. How much time and effort do you devote to them? There is room for improvement. Regarding sales, they are not limited to marketing a product or service, but include how we present ourselves to everyone we interact with. This also encompasses our relationships with all our social circles. If we focus on sales, how can we serve more people each day? An extra call per day equals 250 calls per year. How many additional sales could you make with 250 more interactions over 5 years? That's 150 calls you wouldn't have made otherwise. That's the difference between being average or above average, between being good and being excellent. Adopting this new approach will bring peace to our mind, security to our future, and elevation as human beings. In this way, we can work towards achieving full maturity. With this attitude toward life, we don't have to worry about the results even for a moment. Tomorrow we will start succeeding and will enjoy abundance for the rest of our days.